Tyler Hadley knew the price that he was going to have to pay to have a party.
When someone's parents go out of town and leave their teenagers alone at home, the movies always show a crazy party with lots of beer, houses getting trashed, and people throwing up. Especially if the party was an open event invitation on Facebook, which is never a good idea, trust me. But in this totally disturbing case from Florida in the USA, what first sounds like something from a quirky teen movie quickly turned into an American horror story. And nobody at the party could believe what had happened right beside where everyone was having fun. Actually, this one's pretty gruesome, so brace yourselves and let's investigate the boy who threw a house party with his parents' murdered corpses. On July 16th, Tyler Hadley was a Florida teenager from Port St Lucie who seemed to be having a really great night. His house was full of at least 100 people. He had no idea who most of them were, but his open Facebook invitation for a party at his house had been extremely popular. Basically, there's not much else to do in Port St Lucie if you're not a retired person, except for trashing the local Target. So more and more bored teenagers kept arriving. Tyler's message to his friends, and apparently most of Florida, had read, "Party at my house, HMU." And his friends were kinda shocked that he'd even sent that message, because Tyler's mom and dad had been extra strict with him for the last few weeks. He hasn't exactly been an angel over the last 2 years. So when Tyler said his mom and dad were leaving town for a while, one of his buddies asked,
"What if your parents come home?"
Tyler had answered,
"They won't. Trust me."
So the party went ahead, starting at around 9 p.m. It kept on going for most of the night, and it really didn't take all those unknown guests long to totally wreck Tyler's house. Nothing was safe, but he still didn't seem all that worried about what his parents would do when they got home. He let the strangers smoke inside, put out their cigarettes on the carpet, and smoke illegal substances. Frankly, I'm amazed there wasn't a huge fire. Instead, there was an intense game of beer pong going on next to the family computer. The keyboard was covered in a dull, brown, sticky substance, but nobody at the party really looked at it too hard. Dealers were also having a field day selling their pills, and most people were too high to care. It wasn't until the beer pong bowl rolled under the table into a gross puddle of brownish, sticky liquid that anyone was even a bit freaked out. And that dirty pong ball was bounced right back onto people's drinks as they carried on with the game. I'd have at least run it under a faucet, wouldn't you? At about 4 a.m., the party was still going on. The family's poor dogs, a Labrador and a very old beagle, were both hiding out. They were terrified by all the strangers and noise as people came and went from the house. The only place people couldn't get into was the master bedroom. At about 1 a.m., Tyler asked his friend Mike if he could speak with him outside. Mike didn't think anything of it and went out there with him. What Tyler would tell him would at first sound too horrible to be true. In fact, at first, what Tyler said just sounded like a big, really dark joke. And it was a joke Tyler had made before. Really often. You can see why Mike didn't believe him at first, but Tyler Hadley's wild house party was about to go from drunken fun to pure horror. And this would be the last photo he and Mike would ever take together. First, let's learn a little bit more about Tyler himself. He used to have a pretty nice family life. He was the kind of kid that couldn't wait for his dad to come home so that they could play basketball and hang out together. On the surface, everything looked fine, but as he grew up, his mom, Mary Jo Hadley, was worried he'd be bullied because of his smallish size. This was because Tyler was born prematurely and had started out with some health issues. It might sound unbelievable, but Mary Jo actually put Tyler on human growth hormones to make him taller. Although the makers of the drug claim there aren't any severe side effects, it just seems really extreme, doesn't it? And that wasn't the only prescription that Tyler was taking. He'd basically been pumped with medication since way before he became a teenager. He was given lots of pills for anxiety, melancholy, depression, and severe self-esteem issues. By the time he got to high school, Tyler was getting a reputation as a bit of a weirdo. He'd made loud, random noises during lessons, laugh at his own jokes, and act out. He even started mooing in class. But nobody at school really knew much else about him except one or two friends. Even his old friends hadn't been in touch since he started taking a lot of illegal substances on top of his regular medication. You can probably already tell that was not a great plan. Tyler often got and also got into a lot of trouble for deliberately starting a wildfire. Later on, he was arrested for attacking a friend. This all got him put right into jail. And you can imagine his parents were not happy about his behavior. After spending a little time in a mental institution, they took away his cell phone and grounded him. All he could do was message his buddies on the computer. This is why he was so upset with his mom and dad, and seemed to be getting a pretty bad complex about how they were holding him back. But at a family reunion just a couple of weeks before the crazy party, everyone thought he and his parents were getting on well. At least, that's how it looked. During the party at the Hadley house, a few of the partygoers had noticed a funky smell lingering in some of the rooms. One or two had even spotted that there were dark, oily smears near that locked master bedroom. And there was still that weird puddle under the beer pong table. But again, everyone was having such a great time, nobody really called it out too seriously. It was probably hard to smell that much against all the right? And then Tyler took Mike outside and confessed something truly disturbing. He told Mike he'd taken his parents' lives.
After he told me, I didn't believe him because he's been my best friend forever. I would never suspect anything like this. And I was looking around. He told me if I look good enough, I can see signs. I looked on the floor, I could see signs of. And that's when I went around back and looked in his parents' bedroom.
Tyler had pointed out that both of his parents' cars were still in the driveway. Then he showed Mike the state of the family garage. Mike turned on the lights and got a glimpse of the gruesome evidence. Mike slammed the door and walked away. But he still went round to look at the master bedroom. There was a ton of garbage in the bedroom and also a disgusting smell.
I saw bloody sheets piled everywhere. I saw broken pictures with blood on them, and I looked down and I saw his dad's leg.
Totally traumatized, but probably still kinda high and drunk, Mike stuck around and took a final selfie with Tyler. Mike said that the Tyler in this picture was not the normal version of his friend. This was someone way scarier. Eventually, Mike left the house. He told the cops what had happened, and soon, things were all over for Tyler's crazy party. But just what had happened before Tyler invited a load of strangers to his home? The truth from earlier that day was totally shocking. So, Mike had told the police what Tyler had confessed about the events before he sent out the party invitation. Obviously, Tyler wasn't getting on that well with his mom and dad. This had been brewing for a while. Earlier that day, Tyler had hidden his parents' cell phones and then taken 3 pills to get enough to do the awful thing he had planned. Then, he'd taken a claw hammer from the garage. His mom was working at the computer in the kitchen. Tyler stood behind her for about 5 or 10 minutes before she noticed him. As Mary Jo turned, he used the hammer. I can't imagine how terrifying that must have been for her. While she was screaming why, his dad came running down the stairs and also cried out why. Tyler answered, why the f not? After taking both their lives, Tyler did a pretty poor job of cleaning things up. He dumped his parents and all the debris from that act in the master bedroom and cleaned for 3 hours. He tried to clean up the keyboard where Mary Jo had been sitting with coffee granules, and then he just left the keyboard there. You can probably also guess what was under the beer pong table. I think I'm gonna barf. Once Tyler had thrown the lasts of the horrible mess he'd created into the master bedroom and locked the door, it's safe to say he really didn't have any long-term plans beyond throwing a big party. In fact, he was kind of planning to take his own life at the end of the night. After locking the bedroom, he took a shower. At one point, he'd even laughed at himself in the bathroom mirror. Then he invited half the town to his house. People there said he was more nervous about the noise people were making, as he obviously didn't want the cops showing up. At the end of the wild night, he switched off the lights at the front of the house. But then, the police did appear, because of course, Mike had told them everything. The investigator said that once they got there, Tyler's pupils were totally dilated, and he seemed really out of it. His words made almost no sense. Once they saw what was in the master bedroom, they brought him in. Would his parents get any justice? Tyler was charged with second-degree homicide and processed. Although he acted as though he was sorry, other inmates reported he was signing autographs as Hammer Boy and living large on his creepy reputation. Well, perhaps he was just trying to survive prison. Yeah. I'm being generous again. Even creepier, Tyler wrote a strange note to Michael. He more or less forgave his old friend for turning him into the cops. He also had some bizarre excuses for the horrible things he'd done. In the letter, he said, "I swear to you, Michael, the devil had a hold on me. I talked to him and he talked to me. I'm not a cold-blooded monster. I'm a caring person that made a horrible mistake." Well, they do say to judge people by their actions, and it seems like he was deciding to do this for at least 3 weeks before the night of the party. Tyler went back into court to be resentenced in 2018. This happened because he was just barely a juvenile when he was convicted, just a few months from being an adult, and the law changed in 2012. So his case had to be reviewed. It took a week of testimonies. Doctors confirmed that Tyler's brain was fully developed on that night, so he totally knew what he was doing when he attacked his parents. This meant he wasn't getting out on an insanity defense either. Trust me, the defense team actually tried that excuse. During his resentencing, Tyler gave a statement.
"I still don't understand myself and the reasons for my atrocious actions. I really don't know. Contrary to what anyone else may tell you, I'm telling you the truth. For me to try and explain would be like making excuses, and there is no excuse."
And he even apologized, but his mom and dad's family weren't impressed. They called the 2018 resentencing a third funeral, which makes sense. I can't believe how hard it would have been to listen to all of those horrible details again. His dad's brother was really struggling with facing the events one more time.
That's my brother there. We loved him very, very much.
The testimonials from his mom and dad's family probably made sure that Tyler wasn't leaving any earlier than necessary. After the resentencing, the uncle said,
Tyler Hadley knew the price that he was going to have to pay to have a party like no other. He knew the price. He was mature enough to understand that price.
Now, Tyler will probably be stuck in prison for life, but after the new sentencing, there is some possibility of parole when there just wasn't before. But he isn't getting out anytime soon. I guess the scary part is that he just might one day. This totally reminds me of another sad case where twin brothers took their parents' lives. And it looked like it was just for the money, but there may have been even more to it. Did a deadly cocktail of growth hormones, prescriptions, and illegal drugs really tip Tyler over the edge? Or was he always evil enough to do this on his own mom and dad?